Welcome! My name is Nicole DeFord, and I'm excited to share with you a sample lesson plan I created for one of life's essential biological macromolecules, the carbohydrate. I created this sample lesson for a new class I will be proposing to the university next week. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I take you through the plan from start to finish. It is sure to be sweet.
This is actually one part of a larger lesson that spans multiple days as we learn about each of the 4 biological macromolecules: lipids, nucleic acids, proteins, and carbohydrates, the topic of today's lesson. As students walk into the classroom, the song Sugar, Sugar by the Archies will be playing softly in the background. Anticipatory sets help prepare students for an upcoming lesson by activating prior knowledge and gaining student interest for the lesson. It can be thought of as a pre-game show before the big game. If possible, anticipatory sets should be visual, factual, and meaningful. For the lesson over carbohydrates, I will begin class by telling students that today we will be continuing our discussion on biomolecules, focusing specifically on carbohydrates. I will ask students to close their eyes and visualize a carbohydrate. What is it? Where does it come from? Once they open their eyes, they will go to the Poll Everything link and start typing what they saw, thought, or know about carbohydrates during the visualization activity. As they type in their responses, a word cloud will appear on the overhead. The more often a word is typed, the larger the word becomes in the word cloud. I provided an example on this slide. We will then play a short quizzy on what do you know about carbohydrates to identify what they already know prior to beginning the lesson. Based on student responses, I would then know when I teach my lesson if I need to take it up a notch or provide a more basic introduction before going deeper into the lesson. After the quizzy, I will try to hook students and make the upcoming lesson more meaningful with a table discussion over the question, have you ever been told to load up on carbohydrates before a strenuous activity? They are to share their carb-loading stories with each other at their tables. Tables usually consist of around 4 students. We will then follow this question with a show of hands, then move on to answer the rest of these discussion questions as a class. Why do they tell you to carb load? Can anyone explain what happens at the chemical level to the carbs you ate? Who could tell me what happens if you load up on too many carbs? In my experience, a lot of coaches tell them to eat a big plate of spaghetti the night before a game, but don't really tell them why. After our class discussion, I will start the lesson by sharing and articulating the learning objectives of the lesson, then begin direct instruction over the PowerPoint I created for the lesson. A recorded video version of the lesson will be posted on the LMS for student reference, in case of absences or for future review. This PowerPoint is aligned to the learning objectives. Here is a slide outlining the lesson's learning objectives mentioned in the previous slide. To begin, the PowerPoint will identify the 3 major types of carbohydrates. Students usually know that sugar and starch are carbohydrates, which will connect the lesson to our word cloud, but often fail to realize that fiber is also a carbohydrate. Starch is a complex carbohydrate found in vegetables, grains, and beans. Starchy foods, while often maligned, actually provide the body with key nutrients like iron, calcium, and B-complex vitamins. But going overboard on the potatoes, rice, and bread can lead to the dreaded food coma, making you feel sleepy after eating. While sugar is relatively familiar, the definition of this type of carb is more expansive than the white stuff you put in your tea. Sugar can be classified as any number of sweet, colorless, water-soluble compounds. They are found in fruits, vegetables, milk, and more, making up the simplest group of carbs and are easily identified by the OSE suffix they carry around. Sucrose is the most common type. This is your table sugar, found in soft drinks and processed foods. Other sugars include fructose, which comes from fruit, and lactose, which comes from milk. Fiber also falls into the complex carbohydrate category. Fiber is not digested by the body, passing through the stomach mostly intact. While this sounds a bit strange, it's worth pointing out that fiber keeps you full, regular, and satisfied after eating. These healthy carbs can be found in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and cooked dry beans and peas. Beyond digestive health, fiber may have a positive effect on cholesterol. We will then discuss good carbs versus bad carbs. This is a means of categorizing carbohydrate foods based on their chemical structure, which we will go into more detail later in the lesson. Most scientists agree that not all carbohydrates are created equal, specifically because different types of carbohydrates function differently in our bodies. Some fill us with nutrients, while others may lead to common health issues. Simple carbs are made from just one or two sugar molecules. These include glucose, sucrose, fructose, and lactose. They are found in fruit and dairy products and are often given a pretty bad rap. Complex carbs also contain sugar molecules but are present in the form of long chains, usually of 3 or more, which means that these carbs take longer for the body to digest and absorb. These are often referred to as good carbs and include items like beans, peas, whole grains, and fiber-rich fruits and vegetables. In addition, these foods contain many essential nutrients like fiber, vitamins, and minerals. The PowerPoint then goes into the major functions of carbohydrates, one of which is energy production and storage. Another function of carbohydrate is its role in forming the bodies of organisms, such as the cellulose found in the cell walls of plants, and chitin found in fungi, and the exoskeletons of some insects and crustaceans. The last major function I discuss with students is carbohydrates' role in cell recognition and cell-to-cell communication. I find this one really interesting because carbohydrates are very important for our sense of smell. They are responsible for the receptors, and now with COVID and people losing their sense of smell, I asked the students if they think that there could be a connection. Could the spike proteins of COVID interfere with the carbohydrate receptors? Could that be why we lose our sense of smell? This leads to a short discussion with our shoulder partners. So far, science has not figured out why, but it does give them something to think about. We talk about the elements that make up carbohydrates and the monomers because this whole discussion ultimately becomes about the biochemical building blocks of our body. Carbs are made up of 3 elements, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are always in a 1-to-1 ratio, generally found in the shape of a hexagon, which is 6-sided, or a pentagon, which is 5-sided. Monomers of carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. These include the simple sugars, glucose, galactose, and fructose. Glucose is made by plants during the process of photosynthesis. Fructose is a fruit sugar, as mentioned previously. Polymers of carbohydrates are either disaccharides, which is made by combining 2 monosaccharides, or polysaccharides, which are made by combining many monosaccharides together. Notice here that our monomers are found in rings and are either hexagons or pentagons. We see in this slide that our disaccharides are made by combining our monosaccharides together in 2s. Sucrose is table sugar. We are very familiar with that. Lactose is the sugar found in milk, as mentioned previously. Here are visual examples of polymers, the complex macromolecules of carbohydrates, and you can see easily how they are made of many monosaccharides bonded together. Recall that starch is found in potatoes, glycogen is stored in the liver, cellulose makes up the cell walls of plants, and chitin makes up the exoskeleton of some organisms such as crustaceans. Next, we talk about dehydration synthesis, which is the process used to combine our monomers into polymers. And then we talk about hydrolysis, which is how our polysaccharides, or the polymers, are broken down into monosaccharides, or monomers. It is in a previous discussion that they already chemically know about hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. It's time for a concept check before moving into our learning lab for today. So, what I'll do is I'll have students get out their computers or their cellular devices and enter our session following the join instructions that I'll post here. When students join my Pear Deck, it will automatically open for them on the student view, and they will see my slides and be able to respond to my interactive questions. The responses will be automatically saved within the projector and dashboard view, and I'll be able to find them later in my sessions menu, but I'm also going to be able to see them as we go through the interactive presentation together. So each slide will be projected, and they will interact with them from their device. One change I would make here is that in order for them to get immediate feedback in the actual presentation, I will post the answer slide following each question slide. Here are the interactive slides they will see with directions for interaction. Once we've completed our concept check, we will move from there to the learning engagement activity, which is a lab. Students will build a monomer of carbohydrate going into a disaccharide, then expanding it to a polysaccharide. Students will be paired up for the activity. One student will make a glucose molecule, such as this one, while the other makes a fructose molecule. Then they will show me dehydration synthesis and how these two molecules come together to make a disaccharide called sucrose. You can see the water that's formed from dehydration synthesis here. Then the class will work together using dehydration synthesis again to put all their disaccharides together to make a complex polysaccharide, as you can see in this picture to the right. While they are working together to create this complex polysaccharide, I loop the whole hook back in. While they're building the polysaccharide, I have a group discussion about how carbohydrates are broken down in our body when we need quick energy. And when we don't, how hydrolysis comes back in and puts them into a polysaccharide and posits them into our liver. If we have too much, then we end up going into a fatty liver situation. Or how, if we don't eat enough carbs and we need some energy, dehydration synthesis comes back into play and goes back to the liver to break down the glycogen where the carbs are stored to go ahead and give us that quick energy. There is also an analysis portion to this lab that has deeper level questions that students will need to answer together with their partners. As we wrap up our learning activity, I revisit our learning objectives. One of my formative assessments will happen here, where I have students complete the same quizzing again to see if their knowledge has expanded. And before leaving class, I will have them complete an exit ticket. I'll ask them to tell me one thing they learned today that they didn't already know before coming into class, and to tell me one question they still have about carbohydrates. That gives the student the opportunity to share with me that they didn't really understand something that we did, or to ask a deeper level question, both of which I can address during our next class. This completes my lesson plan idea. Thank you for watching this video, and I appreciate any constructive criticism you have. Have a blessed night.